print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Laura, and for the next hour I'll be reading from the March 22nd issue of the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Vogue is suing a dog fashion magazine. Guess what it's called? The creator of Dogue, circulation under 100, has been accused of trademark infringement by Vogue's publisher Condé Nast. By Callie Holterman. A recent cover of Dogue, a canine fashion magazine, featured an Italian greyhound wearing an evening gown, an opera glove on each paw. Several pages in, a nattily dressed labradoodle showed off a collection of trench coats. Readers find this sort of thing charming. The media company, Condé Nast, does not. In December, Condé Nast filed a lawsuit in federal court arguing that Dogue had infringed on its trademark for Vogue, the human-centric fashion magazine published since 1892. Lawyers for the company wrote in their complaint that Dogue's logo was obviously intended to confuse customers by suggesting a relationship between the magazines. The continued publication of Dogue was a blow to Vogue's reputation, they added, and was likely to damage Condé Nast irreparably. Now, the typically harmonious world of dog fashion is gearing up for a lethal legal showdown that Olga Portnaya, the creator and editor-in-chief of Dogue, believes is about far more than who gets to photograph a Vizsla in a turtleneck. Art and culture have always evolved through reinterpretation and dialogue, Ms. Portnaya, a graphic designer and photographer who started Dogue in 2019, said in an interview. For me, this is a larger fight. I'm not just fighting for my own work and our community, but for other independent creators. She said she was astonished that Condé Nast was so interested in confronting her magazine, a one-woman editorial operation that sells fewer than 100 copies per issue. The complaint demands that Ms. Portnaya pay Condé Nast unspecified damages and deliver all copies of Dogue to the company for destruction. A representative for Condé Nast said in an email that the company had made several efforts to resolve the dispute with Ms. Portnaya before going to court. The representative added that Ms. Portnaya's publication used Vogue images without permission and that Condé Nast takes intellectual property violations seriously. Dogue began as a part of a series of faux magazine covers that Ms. Portnaya, 41, who lives in Los Angeles, posted on Instagram under the handle CoverDogs. Other installments included Sparts Illustrated and Vanity Fair. She released the first print issue of Dogue in 2021 with a splashy cover featuring her Pomeranian Mimi Bear. She said the magazine's name was a homage to the breed of Mastiff she owned growing up, the Dogue de Bordeaux, as well as a playful nod to Vogue, which makes our dog fashion focus immediately clear. The magazine is offered free online and sold at a single newsstand in Beverly Hills, California. Each issue features a four-legged covered star beneath serif text that reads Dogue, placed roughly where the Vogue mark appears on Condé Nast magazine. Between spreads of canine couture, readers might encounter an interview with the actor Kevin Costner about his English Labrador Bobby, who enjoys eating carrots. Ms. Portnaya writes most of the magazine's articles under the byline Ollie Port. The two magazines coexisted without incident until 2024, when Condé Nast displayed a fresh enthusiasm for four-legged models. That August, Vogue's website published a digital issue featuring celebrity dogs, including Pilaf, a petite chihuahua who belongs to the actress Demi Moore. It was accompanied by a cover-style image with the title Dogue, and an introduction written by Chloe Mal, now the head of editorial content at American Vogue. Dogs have always had a place in the pages of Vogue, Miss Mal wrote, adding that the project had been inspired by a February 1897 Vogue cover featuring a Labrador puppy. Condé Nast brought back its version of Dogue the next summer with a cover contest for readers' pets that received 56,000 submissions and feature stories on dogs belonging to Sabrina Carpenter and Lewis Hamilton. In October 2025, Condé Nast sent Miss Portnaya a cease and desist letter instructing her to rebrand her magazine. The company also opposed Dogue's trademark application, which Ms. Portnaya filed in 2022 and is still underway. Trademark cases generally come down to whether a customer is likely to be confused about a product's source or sponsorship. Will customers think that Ms. Portnaya's Dogue is in some way endorsed by Vogue? That's the big-ticket question, said Jennifer E. Rothman, a law professor at the University of Pennsylvania. She pointed to a trademark dispute between Jack Daniels and the maker of a chew toy shaped like a whiskey bottle, the Bad Spaniel's Silly Squeaker. In 2023, the Supreme Court said that the dog toy manufacturer was not protected by the First Amendment. This case is about dog toys and whiskey, two items seldom appearing in the same sentence, Justice Elena Kagan wrote in the court's opinion. A lower court later ruled that the toy was unlikely to confuse consumers, but that its maker had unlawfully tarnished the Jack Daniels brand by associating it with canine excrement. In 2007, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit rejected a trademark infringement claim against the company behind Chewy Vuitton dog toys, which resembled miniature Louis Vuitton handbags. There's lots of these dog cases, in part because people like to make puns and parodies around dogs and dog toys, Professor Rothman said. Based on an initial review of the Dogue dispute, she said she did not think it was a slam dunk for either party. It could be litigated for some time, and that makes it expensive. That may pose a challenge for Ms. Portnaya. In February, she started a crowdfunding drive to help cover her legal expenses that has raised $6,000. She is being represented by David A. Mackman, a patent and intellectual property lawyer who wrote in an email that he was disappointed in Condé Nast. My client's magazine is a parody that features humorous pictures of dogs, while Vogue is a fashion magazine that features serious photographs of human models, he wrote, adding, I don't think anyone would have difficulty recognizing the difference. At South by Southwest, Sparks was flying high. Fergus Campbell, Lola Lafia, and a merry band of Zoomers dazzled at their first film festival with an affecting debut about friendship, time travel, and queer identity. By Emma Schartz. On a March evening in Austin, Texas, Fergus Campbell and Lola Lafia were stuck in traffic on their way to the world premiere of their debut feature film, Sparks, at the 2026 South by Southwest Film Festival. But they weren't the only ones running late. The film's co-stars Thomas Dean Baker and Charlie B. Foster, who uses they/he pronouns, burst through the front doors just 10 minutes before start time. Mr. Baker, who wasn't able to catch a ride to the theater, had to drive the 3 miles on a Lime scooter in his 3-piece brown velvet suit, with Mr. Foster on the back. He told me, hold me tight like Jack and Rose from Titanic, Mr. Baker said. Sparks, whose charm is distinctly Gen Z in its whimsical pessimism and innocent irreverence, follows a group of teenage friends nicknamed The Crop, who live outside Reno, Nevada, and spend lazy afternoons driving around in clouds of vape smoke and partying at a desolate drive-in movie theater. The Crop believes that the local reservoir can transport them to any time and place they desire. When a new friend, Cleo, portrayed by Elsie Fisher, the star of the 2018 film Eighth Grade, decides to travel to 1960s Paris, relationships shift as the teenagers wrestle with the fact that life may not be better in other locations and eras. The morning of the premiere, the largely New York City-based cast reunited with Mr. Campbell, the film's writer and director, and Ms. Lafia, a producer for the photo shoot at a pool in South Austin, taken aback by the bracing 55-degree temperature. It had been over a year since they had all been together. Now they were helping one another figure out what to wear. Denny McAuliffe, who plays Max, was the last to arrive, and when he finally showed up, his large suitcase exploded all over the place. Mr. Campbell wiggled into several different pairs of ill-fitting skinny jeans while his friends laughed. Mix Foster, a child of the acclaimed actress Jodie Foster, traipsed around the room, picking tropical print swim trunks, a leather jacket, and a fur trapper hat to wear. Mix Fox giggled every time they were directed by the photographer to look serious. "Pretend Rome is under attack," said Simon Downs Tony, who played Trip in the film, in a failed attempt to help them pull it together. The idea for the film dates to August 2018, when Ms. Lafia, 25, and Mr. Campbell, 26, met during their freshman orientation at Columbia University in New York. "We both identified each other as people who were making things," Ms. Lafia said of Mr. Campbell, who came from the Bay Area with filmmaking ambitions. In college, Mr. Campbell wrote and directed Sanko Stream, an experimental web series that followed two college students trying to meet the director Paul Thomas Anderson. The series set the stage for Sparks, in which Cleo travels back in time to seek a part in a Jean-Luc Godard film. "I want to engage with the entire body of cinema around me," Mr. Campbell said, "and that's where the anxiety comes in. Sparks channels that anxiety." In the meantime, Miss Lafia took a gap year after her sophomore year that brought her to Fly Ranch in Nevada, outside the Black Rock Desert, with a group of architects and engineers she'd met to help work on a land development project. She invited Mr. Campbell to document the experience, and that's when the two discovered the landscape for Sparks. They worked on the script during their school breaks, taking road trips between Nevada and the Bay Area, scouting locations, and talking to teenagers at skate parks who helped inspire the 7-character friend group. After 3 weeks of rehearsal, the crew packed for a 23-day shoot in October 2024 in the Nevada desert. The average age on set was 24, which proved to be an asset. "Set felt very democratic in a lot of ways," said Ms. Fisher, who explained that smaller age gaps minimized the hierarchies that could impede collaboration. Peter Hall, a senior programmer for South by Southwest, who was part of the team that accepted Sparks into the festival, was preparing for the Q&A with the cast that would follow the screening. "It's unusual for a film that is this distinct to be this realized from a filmmaker this early in their career," he said. Mr. Downs Tony and Mr. McAuliffe guided their parents into the audience, while Mix Foster, still windswept from the scooter ride, grabbed a chair at the end of the row for their famous mother. Even though Mix Foster was no stranger to show business, they were still feeling nervous about their film debut. As the lights dimmed, Mr. Campbell and Miss Lafia's names flashed across the screen, and the theater erupted in cheers. Lula Gorgiadis, a Brooklyn-based painter and longtime friend of Mr. Campbell's, took out her phone to film the title cards she created for Sparks. After the screening, everyone headed to the Golden Goose, a bar in Austin, for an after-party, to mingle and dance under the deep red lighting and feast on cocktails and sizzling barbecue. Mr. Baker, slouched in his chair, reminisced about shooting an intimate scene with Mr. McAuliffe in the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art's Red Bathroom. Queer youth can identify in many ways with him, said Mr. McAuliffe about his character Max, who is gay. He's got this certainty about him, but everything is very much up in the air in his environment. It can feel really isolating sometimes to have a sense of self that's not necessarily validated. 2 days later, the cast jumped in the back of an old Chevy pickup truck, taking in the Austin sun that had finally warmed the city, and headed to a bar with air conditioning. Miss Fisher and Mix Foster scrounged up quarters from Mr. Campbell, loading up the jukebox with songs by Chuck Berry and the Beach Boys. Mr. Downs Tony danced alongside a fellow cast member, Madison Hu, while Mix Foster and Mr. Olive sat down to arm wrestle. "I'm not being nice," Mix Foster exclaimed, eking out a victory. The ragtag group came to the project through friends of friends. Though Miss Hu, a former star of the Disney Channel show Bizaardvark, and Miss Fisher had backgrounds on big productions, they valued working alongside Mr. Downs Tony, a first-time actor scouted by Miss Lafia. She had promised him pizza on the very first test shoot. There was no pizza. Many of them discovered the importance not only of indie filmmaking, but also of the work they had created with Sparks when they were approached by a young festival goer after their Friday night screening and Q&A. Mac Budd, 19, came up to Mr. Campbell and Miss Lafia wearing a suit jacket decorated with sparkly pink letters across his back, spelling out the film's title and credits. Mr. Budd's hands were shaking as he gushed about his new favorite film and asked Mix Foster if they could take a photograph together. He was profoundly moved by Sparks. As a recent high school graduate, he said he appreciated the film's sense of whimsy and Zoomer queer representation. Tyler, Texas, doesn't get films like this, Mr. Budd told them. Within the first 15 minutes of watching Sparks, he said, "This was one of the movies I was looking for." You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Running on rage bait. Young conservatives in Florida are fascinated by James Fishback, a long-shot gubernatorial candidate known for his provocative online posts. By Nathan Taylor Pemberton. The crowd on the back patio of the sports pub milled about anxiously. Some 200 or so Floridians, many in their teens and early 20s, had been drawn to this nondescript Miami alehouse on a weeknight in February by the algorithm. From Instagram to X to TikTok, they had seen videos of a man named James Fishback, a pugnacious 31-year-old in Warby Parker glasses who was running in the Republican primary for Florida governor. These platforms had fed them clips of Mr. Fishback making overt references to Mussolini, questioning ties to Israel in a sit-down with Tucker Carlson, and clutching an assault rifle and threatening to shoot on sight anyone wishing to do his campaign harm. Many had watched Mr. Fishback as he refused to denounce Nick Fuentes, an avowed anti-Semite who had endorsed him and engaged in a flame wars with an OnlyFans star after he proposed a sin tax on adult content creators. His ideas aren't textbook MAGA, said Hugo Ron, a 17-year-old high school student from nearby Weston, who had come to the campaign event straight from class. The ideas in question are a mix of nativist American First stances and edgelord flair, reflecting the enthusiasms shared by young conservatives and far-right influencers on social media, but not always by President Trump's Republican Party. In Mr. Fishback, who has called for the public hanging of Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirators and the end of the H-1B visa program, they have found a candidate who has embraced their political fixations. Mr. Fishback is mounting a long-shot campaign. The favorite in the statewide contest is Byron Donalds, a Trump-endorsed congressman with a $45 million war chest. By comparison, Mr. Fishback, a relative political newcomer, has just $6,000 on hand as of January, according to a quarterly finance report. Mr. Fishback claims the campaign is on track to hit $1 million in contributions by April. He has also faced several controversies, including legal battles with his former employer, a prominent investment firm, and with a former fiancée, who has said that their relationship began while she was still a minor. There are questions, too, as to whether Mr. Fishback meets Florida's residency requirements to qualify for the election. In each instance, Mr. Fishback has downplayed or denied any wrongdoing. But Mr. Fishback is refining an emerging style of far-right politicking that has him toggling between trollish online posts and idealist policy proposals. Fluent in the blunt provocation and ceaseless performance of the internet, Mr. Fishback and his campaign have become darlings of algorithms, powered in part by Clipper accounts, social media pages that post video snippets and spread them widely, generating attention among young conservative voters. Some of those young voters are participating in electoral politics for the first time, flocking to Waffle House restaurants and campus quads, often in large numbers, to see Mr. Fishback pitch a different kind of politics for a post-Trump era, one where casual racism is common, as evidenced by numerous reports of young Republican group chats filled with slurs and epithets, where anti-Israel and anti-tech stances are default positions, and where closed border policies are presented as common sense fixes. He's appealing to kids that have grown up under this giant cloud of doom, said Rick Wilson, a former Republican strategist in Florida and the founder of the Lincoln Project, an anti-Trump group. They've gone through COVID, to the 2008 financial crisis, and the war on terror. They're not waking up thinking about free market conservatism or ways to increase shareholder value. Fishback, in many ways, he added, seems to be in on the joke. At the sports bar, many said they were curious to know more about Mr. Fishback than what they had seen on their feeds. Mr. Wan, who will be 18 in time for the August primary, said he learned of the candidate in the fall after seeing his campaign announcement video on TikTok. He said he was leaning toward voting for Mr. Fishback because of his views on issues like Israel and his calls to protect the environment. But before committing, he wanted to see Mr. Fishback operate in person. I don't want to hear a 5-second clip on TikTok, he said. Across the room was Rodrigo Soberon, a 26-year-old print shop employee who had brought along his girlfriend. He had seen Mr. Fishback's videos on Instagram Reels and was drawn to his calls to divest Florida taxpayer dollars from Israeli bonds. That's something that not a lot of people say out loud, not in Florida at least, said Mr. Soberon, who voted for Mr. Trump in 2024. Pacing behind a narrow bar, a smudge of ash on his forehead for Lent, Mr. Fishback spent 2 hours on issues including cost of living, education, the environment, and personal liberty. He vowed to eliminate tolls for Florida drivers and state property taxes. You shouldn't be paying the government to own your home. All while promising to implement progressive-sounding initiatives like paid maternity leave. The most energetic responses of the evening came after his mentions of Israel. Some on the new woke right, they would call us anti-Semitic for saying, "No, we're not giving more money to Israel," he said at one point. He mostly avoided referencing the provocative themes usually seen in his social media posts. In person, he also toned down his attacks against his opponent, Mr. Donalds. The Donalds campaign declined to comment for this article, but in a post last month, Mr. Donalds dismissed Mr. Fishback's campaign as performative slop. Those who had come hoping to catch the more incendiary side of Mr. Fishback captured in TikTok edits, may have been disappointed. On immigration, a centerpiece of his early online talking points, Mr. Fishback, whose mother immigrated from Colombia, straddled the hard-nosed position of America first while avoiding its derisive rhetoric on immigrants. One could detect confusion in the hesitant applause that followed. I'm not going to say the reason there's an affordability crisis is because the guy who cuts your neighbor's grass came here 30 years ago, Mr. Fishback said. There will always be a place for generosity and compassion in America, but we've been generous and compassionate enough. Online terminology and some extremist politics did occasionally burst into view. Mr. Fishback, with a wink, inserted looks-maxing lingo into his stump speech, promising at one point that he would mog Mr. Donalds, meaning roughly to dominate. His campaign, he added, would be all about Florida maxing. Marlo Mayo, a 19-year-old who studies at Florida International University, said she thought Mr. Fishback's online strategy was smart for catching the attention of Gen Z voters. But she was concerned about the rising influence of streamers like Clavicular, a 20-year-old looks-maxer who espouses a nihilistic and narcissistic vision of masculinity. Mr. Fishback streamed with the influencer in January. Still, most of this young set seemed to grasp intuitively that controversy equals attention in today's political economy. Brooklyn Chetty, a freshman at Florida Atlantic University, didn't fault Mr. Fishback for his antagonistic online persona. I wouldn't say it bothers me at all, she said. I think he's just trying to get his name out there. After his speech, Mr. Fishback posed for pictures with a line of followers snaking across the patio. He asked them to tag him and repost the images and any content they had made that evening. With limited resources, he travels with just a small team of staff members who have little or no experience working on statewide races. Mr. Fishback said he employed only 8 full-time campaign employees. Among them is 18-year-old Kingston Brook, the campaign's digital director, who, before joining the campaign, ran a popular Fishback fan account on X. I liked his thoughts on immigration, Mr. Brook said. At every campaign event, Mr. Brook streams Mr. Fishback's appearances for the candidates' official social media pages. Then, over a group chat on Signal, he coordinates with the campaign's clippers, young volunteers who chop up footage of Mr. Fishback's comments and circulate it across the internet. Impressions are what matter to us, Mr. Fishback said later that evening in an interview with the New York Times. He was walking the streets of the Brickell neighborhood of Miami, dodging clusters of heeled nightclubbers en route to a taping of Fresh and Fit, a podcast hosted by Myron Gaines and Walter Weeks that is associated with the Manosphere. In conversation, Mr. Fishback was candid and at times coy about his scorched earth style of campaigning. A former national debate champion and founder of a small investment firm, he's a rapid-fire talker who frequently uses financial jargon in conversation. He likes to say that voters should hire him, and he speaks of his time selling complex financial products. Above all, he tends to present his thinking in a blunt, technocratic logic accompanied by a knowing grin. If you're a candidate polling at 2%, you have to be edgelord a little bit, let's be honest, Mr. Fishback said. Asked about his attacks, denounced by many Republicans as racist, against Mr. Donalds, who is black, he added, I actually don't think the personal attacks against Byron do anything for us. Mr. Fishback said he had closely studied Mayor Zohran Mamdani's campaign, which used social media to help propel to victory the New York assemblyman, who once polled at 1%. A recent headline in The Spectator, a political magazine in Britain, wondered if Mr. Fishback might be the right's answer to Zohran Mamdani. Mr. Wilson, the Florida political strategist, said Mr. Fishback might be a harbinger of conservative politics to come, comparing him to Howard Dean, the former Democratic presidential candidate. Dean didn't win the job, but his campaign transformed how candidates approach online activism and fundraising, Mr. Wilson said. We can laugh at Fishback's absurdities, but I don't want to undercount the future that he represents. After that evening, Mr. Fishback was back online in full effect. Recently, he posted a video of himself shooting an assault rifle at a gun range in Florida's Panhandle. "Pull up, Byron Donalds. Let's see if you're really black," the sinister-sounding caption read. The post on X, which was viewed upward of 3 million times, was widely condemned by observers across the political spectrum. Asked what exactly he meant by it, Mr. Fishback responded in a text message, "We do a little trolling." A moment for overalls. The workwear and children's staple has lately become associated with the images of notable men. By Max Berlinger. They have been seen on male figure skaters and political candidates, not to mention a certain snake wrangler turned reality TV star. They have suspenders, come in denim, leather, and rubbery versions, and are worn with or without shirts. They are overalls, or bib trousers, or salopettes, a staple of children's and workwear wardrobes, and they have lately become associated with the images of notable grown men. Perhaps the most indelible of those men is Rob Roush, who frequently wore denim overalls during his recent appearance on the reality competition show The Traitors. He sometimes wore them shirtless, showcasing his toned shoulders and the snakes tattooed on his upper body. Mr. Roush, 27, who lives in rural Alabama, said in an interview that the sight of overalls reminded him of home. "There's a lot of farming and agriculture around where I live, and they're popular," he said. He wore overalls growing up, he added, and later as a contestant on Love Island USA, the reality dating show that put him and his wardrobe on the map. When Mr. Roush arrived on the set of The Traitors, he found a pair of overalls waiting for him, he said. Overalls are also something of a signature for the blues musician Buddy Guy, a cast member of the film Sinners. He wore a black leather pair to the Oscars on Sunday and has performed on stage in various styles. Others recently seen in overalls include Graham Plattner, the oyster farmer, running as a Democrat for Senate in Maine. His campaign has released a photo showing Mr. Plattner in a hard-worn fishing bib that evokes the salt-of-the-earth image he has fashioned as a candidate. At the Winter Olympics in Italy, the Spanish figure skater Tomás Laurent Gorino Sabate performed a Minions-inspired routine that involved a tight-fitting costume resembling denim overalls. The actor Alexander Skarsgård, portraying a gay biker in the BDSM romance film Pillion, wears a low-cut black leather pair. Mr. Skarsgård recently told CNN that he quite enjoyed the black leather chaps. Denim overalls, the kind favored by Mr. Roush, were something of a trend in the 1990s, a decade that has continued to influence fashion today. In the 90s, they were associated with musical artists like Tupac Shakur and entertainers like Brad Pitt and Will Smith. A Google spokeswoman said that searches for 90s overalls outfit had surged during the last week of February, as had searches for Rob Roush. The final episode of Mr. Roush's season of The Traitors was released that week. Like Mr. Roush, Brandon Marlowe, 36, an owner of a digital media company in Los Angeles, has long worn overalls. He sees them as more classic than trendy. "I think that we've kind of evolved beyond them being an ironic piece of clothing to something that is now timeless," he said. Mr. Marlowe, who has styled his overalls with loafers and boots, added that people often commented on them. "It's still not an article of clothing they're used to seeing on an adult man, but they're always complimenting me or commenting on how I've styled them, said Mr. Marlowe, who has overalls from Carhartt, Lee and Liberty, a century-old American workwear brand. Referring to Mr. Rausch, Mr. Marlowe added, "Rob will have the last laugh when luxury designers release their version of an overall. Some, like Prada, already have. In recent years, the brand's overalls have been worn by athletes like the skier Gus Kenworthy." You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. How New Yorkers prepare for one of their most vibrant holidays. From Fordham to Bay Ridge to Hollis, Muslim businesses get ready for Eid al-Fitr, the exultant celebration marking the end of the holy month of Ramadan. By Sariba Hassan. On Wednesday evening, at a stall in the Malcolm Shabazz Harlem Market, Fatou Drama held up a full-length mirror for Adama Lo, who was trying on a bright pink boubou made in Senegal. Muftawu Fusini gave Harris Mohammed a taper fade haircut at La Paz Beauty and Barber Salon in the Fordham section of the Bronx, as lively folk music in Hausa, a West African language, played from a speaker. And over in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, Essa Masood, the owner of Balade Halal Foods, was on the phone, standing by a giant decorative olive tree in the middle of his Middle Eastern specialty supermarket that was decked out in lanterns, crescent moons, and stars, making sure the store's supplies of popular imported goods were in stock. All three business owners have had a busy week helping Muslims prepare for Eid al-Fitr, the jubilant holiday on Friday, March 20th, that marks the end of the holy month of Ramadan. "Something about the air is just different," Ms. Drama, a clothing designer from the Bronx, said about the holiday. On the days leading up to Eid, Muslims around the city were shopping for delicacies, clothes, and jewelry, and having their hair and henna done. Many business owners have said they appreciate helping people feel their best on a special day after a disciplined month of fasting and reflection. Growing up, it was a huge part of the Eid experience, getting henna done and picking out outfits last minute. "There's so much excitement to it," said Rajwana Parvin, a henna artist in Queens. "Now, being able to create that experience for other people, it's very meaningful to me because it's about being part of those memories." During the week before Eid al-Fitr, the first in the city under a Muslim mayor, 7 vendors, businesses, and mosques around the New York City discussed how they were contributing to the vibrant and festive day. The supermarket. In front of Mr. Masood's store, a sign that read "Happy Ramadan" from Balade swung over the street. "All this decorating is still new," said Mr. Masood, 47, who recently opened a home and decor store next door to his supermarket that he keeps stocked with Eid decorations. "It's good for the kids," he said, "to give that feeling that Ramadan can be celebrated not only within our homes and in our businesses, but also on the city street." At Balde, which his family opened in 2003, most of the items are imported. Around Eid, the sweets like buttery Lebanese biscuits and Yemeni date and walnut cookies are especially popular. "We have much more variety," he said about the delicacies now available in the market for the holiday. When he was growing up in Brooklyn, the options were limited. The designer. Miss Drama, 27, sold 4 boubous in 5 minutes on Wednesday evening. Her stall is small, but the crowd of mostly young women were specifically looking to Miss Drama for Eid styling tips. Miss Drama started her business, Fatima's Obsession, as a hijab brand in 2019. Over time, she started designing her own boubous and abayas. Both are traditional dresses, adding a maximalist flair. "I wanted to intertwine my West African culture with modest wear," she said. Her latest drop, an Eid collection she designed for the holiday, sold out in an hour. After a month that feels like a spiritual cleanse, Miss Drama said, "I feel like my role is to make sure that everyone who comes into my store steps out feeling confident and beautiful." The barber. Every year, Mr. Fusini, 27, goes into his barber shop at 9 a.m. on the day before the holiday. He doesn't get home until 8 a.m. the next day on Eid. "It takes 2 days or 3 days to recover from the work I did for people to look good for Eid," said Mr. Fusini. On Wednesday afternoon, 6 men sat in chairs and several were standing, watching the Champions League soccer match on the TV while waiting for Mr. Fusini, who moved from Accra, Ghana, to New York in 2022. Some of them were waiting for 2 hours, but that's not as bad as the 4-hour wait the day before. The younger clients typically come to Mr. Fusini because he does a good job, said his client, Mr. Mohammed. Mr. Fusini, who won't even have time to get his own hair cut, said providing that feeling gives him enough gratification. The henna artist. Ms. Parvin set up Edie boxes with treats in her Hollis home, where she applied henna on clients all week. Edie is a gift, typically cash, that is given to children on the holiday. Ms. Parvin, 23, started her business, Henna by Rejwana, in 2023, but she has been doing henna since she was 12, drawing paisleys and flowers on relatives' hands. She soon became the designated henna artist in her large family, who would spend the night before the holiday together making Bangladeshi sweets and appetizers and playing board games, like Ludo, until 3 a.m. As she got older, Ms. Parvin learned more about organic henna and developed her own recipe. Now, by popular demand, she sells cones of her henna paste and even shared her recipe on Instagram. "I'm not a gatekeeper," she said. The clothing and jewelry shop. MD Tichmur Alam, a former taxi driver, opened Zinyana's Fashion House when his work dried up following the COVID-19 pandemic. At the store in Ozone Park, Queens, last-minute shoppers browsed through 3-piece salwar kameez from Pakistan and long-sleeved thobes from Dubai, with bedazzled bags and colorful bangles on display to pair with them. Stores like his have long been popular in Jackson Heights, Queens, but in recent years, wealthier residents have moved into the neighborhood and expenses have soared for business owners. Mr. Alam, 50, said that he had been able to keep prices more affordable. As a result, more customers from across the 5 boroughs have been coming to his store, which draws an especially large crowd after Muslims break fast during Iftar. Mr. Alam, who has 3 children, said that he loves dressing them in traditional clothes. "We are making a business," he said, "but at the same time, we are holding our roots." The bakery. Ali Zaman and Mohammed Ghiassi are gearing up for their first Eid at Diljan, the Afghan bakery they opened in Brooklyn Heights in December. They introduced a special sweet for the holiday, an Afghan cardamom cream roll. It is among the pastries the pair offer that reimagines classic flavors that aren't explored as much in the baking world in New York. Mr. Zaman, 30, said. That includes their halwa sticky buns and their sheer pira, a decadent Afghan milk fudge housed in a buttery pastry dough with vanilla diplomat cream and pistachio frangipan. "It tastes like my childhood," Mr. Zaman said. This Eid al-Fitr comes at a heavy time for many Muslim Americans, including Mr. Zaman, with growing undisguised bigotry against Muslims in the country and war and destruction roiling their communities back home. Having this really joyous, mindful, reflective month, as well as this celebration at the end, is, I think, a really nice way to display the world who we are and what we stand for, he said. The mosque. Masjid at Taqwa, which first opened its doors in the Bedford-Stuyvesant section of Brooklyn in 1981, holds a morning prayer on Fulton Street and Bedford Avenue to accommodate the roughly 5,000 people who gather in colorful kaftans, abayas, and kurtas, traditional clothes from around the world. "It's a very beautiful day," said Osam Adam, who moved to New York from Khartoum, Sudan, in the early 1990s, and helps lead and organize the morning prayer. Every day, Muslims gather from all walks of life, different languages, different complexions, but still we pray toward one direction. In order to make it happen, the staff at the mosque get a permit from the police department and starting at 6 a.m. helps barricade the street, roll out a large tarp, and set up the sound system and security. "New York has been accommodating to us," said Bilal Hinson, who assists in coordinating program efforts at the mosque. "When I first got here, we didn't have alternate side parking suspended for Eid. We have public school off now for Eid. So we make tiny steps." You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Modern Love. "I'm dead. Don't send me any more mail." My relationship with my landlord was among the most reliable of my life. I miss her. By Rodney Euler. My landlord would hate that she's still getting mail. She hated mail when she was living. So it feels like an ironically fitting tribute that in death, she has become one of the minor postal mistakes that used to so annoy her. If she could come back to life and see the mail for her piling up, she would surely write on it, "I'm dead. Don't send me any more mail." She frequently wrote similar messages on mail that had been delivered to the wrong address or had been left for a long-gone tenant. She treated our foyer as an interactive comment box for the U.S. Postal Service. I was Joyce Kinch's tenant. Over the past 9 years, and counting, I have lived in 2 different units in her Brooklyn brownstone, where she occupied the garden apartment. When friends talk about their relationships with their landlords, they often speak of distant corporations or absentee owners in other states. Not Miss Kinch, who was omnipresent, rarely leaving the garden and parlor floors she occupied, and who was by far the person who called me the most, more than any friend or relative. None of my friends ever mentioned attending their landlord's 84th birthday party as I did with Miss Kinch soon after I moved in, me being the only tenant on her 7-person guest list. During the pandemic, she once called to check in about something general, whether I had enough chairs for my parents who would be visiting soon. And then, in a moment akin to an actor breaking the fourth wall, asked if she was being too invasive, acting like a grandmother when I had never asked for such a thing. It saddened me that she would ever view herself as a burden. It was also an odd moment to question our dynamic. She hadn't seemed to question it when I helped her deal with her cat, who had chosen to die on my apartment doorstep, or on other occasions, such as when she asked me to help her log on to a virtual funeral service, with me sitting next to her, off screen, in case she ran into technical issues. After I logged her on, she looked closely at the screen. She was half blind, her eyes developing a light milky glow in recent years, and said to me, "Who are all these people?" I could only shrug. When she offered me food, often stuffed peppers, I would lie about how much I liked them, but would eat them anyway, and feel grateful. When I offered her food, she did not lie when it didn't suit her taste. She never asked if I had grandparents. If she had, I would have told her they had died so long ago that I associated having grandparents with childhood, not adulthood. Miss Kinch offered me something adjacent to grandparenthood, in how she looked after me. The fact that she charged me ridiculously little rent literally put a roof over my head at a time when I was struggling to manage on my own after years of underpaid nonprofit work and a move necessitated by the end of a long-term relationship. My home and hers became a sanctuary when I desperately needed one. She gave me the closest thing to having a grandparent as an adult that I'm likely to have. Unlike in a traditional grandparent-grandchild dynamic, though, strange pockets of basic personal information remained unknown to both of us. In the near decade we knew each other, she never asked what I did for a living, nor did I know what she did when she was a working adult. She never asked about my relationship status, and part of me wonders if she realized I was gay or simply assumed I had frequent platonic sleepovers with male friends. I knew she had children and grandchildren, but not how many. I knew nothing about a past husband or partner. There is an intimacy formed by shared foundational history, the kind captured in countless photographs of me with my grandparents, complementing the sensory memories of being with them in their cars and homes. Miss Kinch showed me another kind of intimacy, one formed through reliable proximity. Her near daily phone calls were often just to tell me that mail or a package had arrived, frequently at the wrong door. I would catch her in the entry hallway or just inside the building's front yard, observing the street and its occupants with cautious curiosity. We exchanged pleasantries, but mostly I listened to grievances about other tenants, her family, her failing body, and often the postal service, usually delivered in a house dress that hung off her increasingly frail body. No matter the time of day, these interactions often ended with her saying, "Well, I've had enough. I'm going to bed." It felt strange when our relationship slipped into more conversational landlord/tenant territory, usually when something went wrong with the building. She deeply distrusted outside help, so anyone she hired rarely lasted more than a few months. Bringing an issue to her could set off a longer version of her usual complaints, one that might end with a vague threat to sell the building or something similarly ominous. One reason I moved from the second to the third floor was the top floor's bathroom skylight. The room is so small that the tub juts into the door's clearance, but the ceiling rises high above it, capped with an old casement skylight. During bad weather, it makes itself known. Drafts shift the temperature dramatically. High winds produce a distinct whistle. But despite torrential rains that have flooded parents' apartments, it has never leaked. I came to think of Miss Clinch in a similar way. She made herself known, especially when something bothered her, but she felt as steady as the house itself, buttressed by prideful stubbornness that felt safe to those under her care. Before the holidays a few months ago, I woke in the middle of the night to the lights and sounds of an ambulance and a police car outside our building. I hadn't seen her in a week, which was unusual, so I was relieved when I finally heard her faint voice below. "Okay, she's alive," I thought. Early in the new year, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was her grandson, letting me know he would be stopping by to drop off a new lease. I felt a brief panic. I hadn't had a lease in at least 5 years. The last time I did, the building manager she had briefly employed remarked on what a rare deal she was giving me. I had recently quit my job with surprisingly little anxiety, in part because of the stability of my housing. When he arrived, I asked about her, saying I hadn't seen her in weeks. I hadn't been brave enough to call. If she didn't pick up, I knew my mind would wander to worst-case scenarios. He told me she had been in the hospital, dealing with stomach inflammation. "How's her spirit?" I asked. "Oh, you know," he said with a smile. "She's a fighter." He said she had asked about me while she was there, wanting to make sure I was okay. Then he handed me the lease. The rent would remain the same for the next year. She's due to be released on Tuesday, he said. I felt guilty for feeling relieved about my future while hers suddenly seemed uncertain. I started thinking about what I might get her as a welcome back gift, something other than my baking, which she didn't like. On Monday, a relative of hers texted me that she had died. Now that I know she's gone, I feel oddly like an intruder living in her house. But even before I knew she died, the house felt unbalanced by her absence. It was only in how powerfully her death hit me that I understood how a casual companionship, when reliable and stretched over nearly a decade, could deepen into something else entirely. I doubt my friends have photos of their landlords, especially the ones that exist only as corporate address. And I don't technically have photos of Miss Kinch, but I do have an album on my phone filled with pictures of the handwritten notes she left in the lobby. In one, written in almost artistically shaky handwriting, she wrote, "Mr. Mailman, ring bell number 3. This has been here for weeks. Can't you read?" In another, from November 2021, on an envelope addressed to someone named Beulah, she had written, "Dead for centuries," and then placed it on the hallway bench. A few weeks ago, an envelope addressed to Joyce was left on that same bench. I was tempted to write on it, as she would have, "Dead for a week. Do not send her any more mail." You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the March 22nd issue of the New York Times Style section. Your reader has been Laura. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the USA Today. Following that at 2 o'clock is episode number 8 of Buckeye by Patrick Ryan. Stay with us for these readings and more. You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, broadcasting daily readings 24 hours a day of newspapers, magazines, and books to area people who are blind or have a print disability, who are provided reading radios. Radio Readings broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Radio Reading Studios are at 1199 Harlem Road in Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Radio Reading's website is nfradioreading.org. For more information on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, call us at 716-821-5555.
The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of